Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the week again, so in the wise words of Terrell Owens, get your popcorn ready. Weekly review roundup time. So this week I'm coming at you with reviews for two movies that I watched over the past week, and a little bit more of movie news. Had a couple real long, like 10-hour days at work over the week, so not as many movies were able, I wasn't able to push through as many movies, but there is some news that I'd like to talk about near the end, so it'll be a similar structure to last week. So let's roll into some movies. The first movie that I watched this week recently got put up on Netflix. I had seen commercials for it a ton when it was first being released in theaters 3 years ago, and always kind of knew what it was but never really had any inkling to see it, and that was The Boy. So The Boy, for the spoiler-free section of this, The Boy is about this girl gets a job nannying, and she finds out that the family lost their son in a fire and has been taking care of this doll in place of their son for almost 20-something years. Throughout the movie, you start to see that there's something else in the house that may control the doll, or that the doll itself may be alive, so there's always this speculation and this rising tension. The movie does a good job at keeping the tension up throughout the whole movie. There's a lot of the scenes in the first, 3/4 of the movie are very predictable. If you've ever seen any ghost movies, you know what's going to happen. They're very predictable jump scares, but they do them well. I mean, the tension is still there. You still feel the suspense from it. You still jump from seeing them, even though you know it's coming. The performances in it are pretty average. I mean, there's not anything special to it. Everybody plays their character role right. You have the two insane parents of the doll. You have the nanny who gets scared at everything. You have the crazy backstory for her, something to run away from. You have the guy that takes care of the house who she ends up falling for. And you have this, somewhat standard plot line that you can kind of pick up what's going to happen throughout the first 3/4 and understand everything. So all of it, it's difficult for me to talk about this movie spoiler-free because there's a very big twist at the end of this movie that really plays a major part in how I'm going to talk about it. Spoiler-free review, I gave this movie a 7.5. I think that it does everything that it wants to do in that paranormal subgenre of keeping tensions high, giving you jump scares, making you think that there's something in the house. And like I said, pretty standard performances, pretty standard storyline. They do everything well, so I can't knock any of it. It's just, you know what's going to happen throughout the first 3/4 of the movie. Like, you know when something's going to move. You know when something's going to make a noise. You know when someone's going to get caught somewhere. So it's not really surprising. Now, here comes the important part. The spoiler section of this movie. I have never seen a horror movie, modern let alone classic, use a plot twist to pull itself from one subgenre to another. So the entire first 3/4 of this movie, like I said, you think it's a ghost movie. You think it's a paranormal movie. You think there's some kind of ghost possessing the doll. There's a poltergeist in the house. Something's up. The spirit of the son is still around. Well, turns out that the doll is only used for the son who's actually alive to see how people would treat him before he attempts to kidnap them into his lair and catacombs that he has underneath and in the walls of the house. So I had never seen a movie go from one subgenre to the other. The last 20 minutes of the movie are a slasher film. Like, it's them getting chased around the house by this menacing looking, 6'4" guy with a all disfigured face who wears this plain mask that resembles the doll. And that really impressed me, and the fact that they were able to do it successfully is what impressed me even more. This wasn't an idea that I had before, or had seen before, and the fact that they brought something new to the table and did it well, I think helps the movie. It's still a 7.5. The score doesn't improve because of the spoiler. I think the spoiler in itself kept this movie from being lower. If this movie had just stayed a paranormal movie the whole time, would have been very mundane, wouldn't have been a whole lot of fun to watch. Probably would have gotten like a 5 or a 5.5 because it did everything well. It's just, you knew what everything was going to be. But this plot twist out of that subgenre definitely boosted this movie a lot. And if you're a true horror fan, I really think that you should watch it because it's quite impressive for them to do what they did in this movie. So the second movie that I watched this week is the house's October built. So this movie is in the same kind of vein as Hell House LLC, and this one actually came out a year before Hell House LLC in 2015. A group of 5 people are going across the country to try to find the most extreme haunts that they possibly can before Halloween. They get involved in this ongoing plot to try to find this one mythical, magical place. It's called Blue Skeleton, that they really feel like the leader of the group is like, this is our ultimate goal, we need to get to that, that's the most extreme place we can find. So you have all these found footage clips throughout the movie, which the entire movie is found footage. You have these clips of them going through the haunted houses and things starting to escalate throughout, and then you have these clips in this subplot of him really just trying to find information about this Blue Skeleton place. Spoiler-free review. It does a good job in the haunted house aspect. Like I said, this really just feels like a YouTube walkthrough of haunted houses for the first hour of the hour and a half. Like, there's no real deviance of anything. It just looks like you're watching walkthroughs of haunted houses, because that's what it is. There's very little of that subplot just kind of sprinkled throughout, so a lot of it is just these people drinking and going to haunted houses, and that's what you see. There's very little bits and pieces of these creepy things that start to happen to them when they're outside of the houses in their RV that kind of play into that last 30 minutes of the movie, but there's not very much to talk about in ways of an actual movie, because for the first hour, it's all dependent upon these haunted houses, and that's pretty much it. Spoiler-free review, I gave it a 6.5. I thought that it did things well in that last 30 minutes, and I still think the idea is cool of centering movies around haunted houses so that you can have that aspect of walkthrough along with a story to it. But this was not like Hell House, and the idea that the haunted houses themselves weren't really used that well in the story. They were just kind of there. So, yeah, spoiler-free, 6.5. Now, getting into the spoiler section, the idea that they had of Blue Skeleton being this next-level haunt that's borderline not a haunt anymore, it's just crazy people in, like, this cult, I think is a pretty smart idea that kind of pushes the limits, similar to how Hell House did, of saying, okay, this is only how far we can go until these haunts don't become haunts anymore. They just become criminal experiences that people are looking for, and traumatic experiences in people's lives that people are taking advantage of. So I liked that they were kind of commenting on the fact that, about the trajectory and the path of the industry. I think that was kind of cool to see in a movie. The actual Blue Skeleton portion, while it had a really good build-up and you finally get to this climax moment, in the last 20 minutes of the film, that's supposed to be, you know, these terrifying things that are being done to them by Blue Skeleton as part of the extreme haunt. Last 20 minutes, you see about 5 minutes worth of film. The rest of it is just black screen, crunching noises, screams, and you don't see what's happening. Now, that's kind of part of it, in that, you know, these people are being, you know, immersed in it, and they're being forced into this situation, but the fact of the matter is that you've built this up so long, you need to see something. This is not a hidden monster movie like a Blair Witch or a Cloverfield. This is a haunted house movie. Like, you need to be able to see what makes this place so good and why people seek it so long. The performances in it are pretty mundane, because all they had to do was just hold cameras and scream most of the time. There's no real character development, there's no real backstory on any of these people, and there doesn't need to be. It's just kind of there. I thought it was kind of cool that Blue Skeleton kind of had plants in each of the haunted houses that they went to, and these people that continued to mess with them as they got closer and closer to finding out who and where Blue Skeleton was. But I think at the end of the day, for such big build-up, the ending was very disappointing in that you don't see hardly anything. And the very end of it doesn't leave very much to the imagination. Like, it doesn't wrap things up very well. Just leaving them buried in coffins, like, you don't know, okay, do they die in those coffins? Do they not die? And the only way that you know that is because they've already made a sequel. So you understand that they get out of those coffins somehow, but it's not explained how or why. So, like I said earlier, it's a 6.5. It's kind of cool, but at the same time, you can get the same experience watching YouTube videos. So, Alright, so a little bit of movie news. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was the release of Hereditary. Now, I haven't gotten to see it yet. I've been anxiously waiting until the release date. I'm making arrangements to be able to go see it. It looks absolutely incredible to me. But there's a divide in the reviews of it. Critical reviews by professional critics have this movie somewhere in the 90s. Like, everybody has said that it's absolutely incredible. There's a good story to it. It's very good at scaring you. It's one of the scariest movies to come out in the past 20 years. And critics absolutely love the movie. Now, fan reviews have this movie somewhere down in the 40s. And there's no real reason that you can pinpoint in their reviews that has it so low. And I think that this movie is going to serve as a good example of the schism that there is between critics and fans. There's always been movies that critics have thought were incredible and horror fans have thought were pretty mundane and pretty lackadaisical. There's also been movies that horror fans love and critics think are absolutely terrible. When you get to the sequels of these 80s slasher franchises, when you get to these gore fests, when you get to these, real campy, goofy special effects, you have a lot of people who love to see them because it brings them, laughter and humor, or they find enjoyment, or, are intrigued by the amount of work or the process of which makeups and practical effects and special effects were made. So there's other aspects to it other than the actual movie itself for when horror fans watch something. When critics watch it, it's, does this movie tell us a good story? Does it scare us? So they really narrowed their view down. And it's just been true since horror came into the spotlight. I mean, you're talking about the Halloween franchise is a fan favorite, and no movie other than the very original got higher than a 40 on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think that there are a lot of people who absolutely love some of the sequels in that series. Same thing goes for Nightmare on Elm Street, same thing goes for Friday the 13th. I mean, like I said, it's these long-lasting franchises that kind of prove fans will always have a different mind than professional critics. So it was kind of interesting to see that there was this dispute on a movie that was so heavily anticipated and something that was going to be very big for the horror, industry and community, in that this movie had been, just hyped up and hyped up and hyped up, and now you have a group of people who are saying it's incredible and a group of people that are saying it's terrible. So I don't think people expected this divide when this movie was released. I still very much want to go see it, and I feel that I'll be very pleased when I go to see it. It looks amazing from the trailers, but the divide coming from this movie was honestly surprising. Two smaller little tidbits of news that don't really have anything to do with horror, but have something to do with a lot of the movies that I watch. I absolutely love the comic book movies that have been coming out. I read comics when I was younger, and it's awesome to see how accurately some of them have been depicted in movies by big studios. I am thoroughly disappointed at the process by which DC has gone through everything they've done. The only thing that they've done right so far is Wonder Woman. I think Batman vs. Superman gets a worse review than it should. I think the only problem in that was the casting and writing of Lex Luthor, but that is the main point of the story. Wonder Woman was an incredible movie that they did everything correct in top to bottom. I mean, there's no flaws that I can think of in my mind in that movie. And then Justice League falls back off again. And so now DC has been in a mad scramble to try to rearrange their universe yet again to try to save everything, because they're continually losing money on something that they thought would be able to compete with the likes of Marvel. And in doing so, the Wonder Woman sequel was approved as soon as the first premiere came out of Wonder Woman and how much money it made in the critic reviews. This sequel is currently being filmed this week down in Arlington, Virginia. So that was awesome to see that they're so close by, and also there's going to be government affiliation in this. She's going to work with the United States government and be involved with them in some way, or else Arlington would not be involved. That's what movies use. When they film in Arlington and in DC, they're using them because of the government buildings and the things around there, so they'll involve the government in the storyline. I think that'll be interesting. The pictures so far of Steve Trevor still being in the movie and him walking around on set and being a part of it kind of disappoint me, because if he's somehow alive, that was part of the main point of Justice League and the formation of the cinematic universe, was Wonder Woman kind of realizing that she can do things on her own and have this driving force in her life that continues to make her want to save humans. So him being still alive would kind of ruin the whole universe in itself. I love that they're aiming for the 80s in this. I love the new decade. I think that will help Kristen Wiig play the character of Cheetah a lot. I don't think there will be any dispute on how well she plays that character now that she kind of has the 80s nostalgia angle to play. The other DC news is that they approved and are currently working on a Joker solo movie with Jared Leto's Joker. We don't know how good Jared Leto's Joker was because they gave us 10 minutes of him in Suicide Squad. They didn't give us enough of him to see how he performed in that role. And I think the Joker is a very difficult character to give an entire hour and a half to. There is an aspect of chaos that draws attention on the screen and keeps a presence, but I don't think you can do that for an entire hour and a half without something directly fighting back against it. An origin story I don't think would work very well because we've seen it before, and we're kind of at the age in comic book movies where origin stories are at a disadvantage because we've seen so many and people are tired of having to sit through 45 minutes of a movie to find out how somebody gets their powers. So I do not think this is the right move for DC. DC is currently struggling as it is, and the Joker is a very realistic, human character, and that's what's gotten DC in trouble, is trying to make everything hyper-realistic and super somber and super sad and grayscale and not really focus on people's powers and the craziness of the idea of superheroes. So I don't think that's the right move for them. I'm excited to see more of Jared Leto try to do this role because I think that he would have done a good job with the character had we seen him in Suicide Squad. But it's definitely not the right move for the studio, and I think in the end it's going to flop. So that's it for this week. Same as always, guys. If you like what I said, like the video and subscribe. If you don't, leave a comment. We can argue it out. Continue to send in, recommendations of movies that you would like to see me review. If there's certain news that you want me to react to and give my opinion on, if there are questions that you want me to answer about reboots, about what would you like to see, I'd be happy to answer them in my videos as well. And let's just continue this dialogue about movies that we see all the time. So, thanks again.